Hello and welcome back to another episode of Patrox Radio. Again, I'm your host, Patrox, and today I figured that it's been long enough. I decided now would be a good time for me to cover what I can find and what little opinions I can really have on the topic. A lot of people are discussing the East Palestine derailment and the role of Norfolk Southern and politics and everything that's going on, health hazards and whatnot. I decided I wanted to try to simplify things, get as much information as I can, and at the end of this, I have a small timeline set up until pretty much yesterday that's going to break down what's happened with a highlight at the beginning talking about the protests, or not protests, the labor disputes that were going on prior to this that almost led to a railroad strike nationwide. Since September last year, up to 115,000 workers began to rally against working conditions, which could be anywhere between 80 to 120 hours a week without overtime or adequate pay. For the previous 5 years, the industry had laid off around 45,000 employees, making it impossible to meet national demand. Railway workers have not seen a pay raise in the last 3 years. Consolidation has left fewer and fewer competitors, raising issues while raking in billions for their owners. For context, railways make up about 40% of long-distance cargo travel of all U.S. goods, and a massive strike like this one, like the one stopped last year, would have risked losing $2 billion a day by some estimates. In the 90s, the last time the government had to step in, they created a mandatory arbitration system which has up until now pretty much let Congress avoid dealing with the issues directly for some time. The reason they stepped back in September was because arbitrations failed, to which Congress acted early, leaving unions little time to discuss and plans for the deal they were offered. This is why 8 out of the 12 unions wound up accepting the deal. This is a long and drawn-out struggle for those that labor so that we can have a United States of America. For some extra content, this time last year, one of the 7 main railway industries, BNSF, implemented a new attendance policy that would have penalized them for things like sick days, jury duty, or doctor's visits. 17,000 BNSF employees would vote overwhelmingly to strike, but a Trump-appointed judge barred the workers from doing so, claiming that the nonstop work complaints are only a minor dispute. I don't know what about you, but sick leave is an all too common sentiment in America. But besides that, they had been working without a contract for the past 3 years through a pandemic and inflation eating away at their money for too long, while their bosses reported record profits. Biden would eventually step in and essentially stopped any progress for the striking workers by forcing the rail companies to give in to a few of the minor demands, just to keep the economy as top priority, since he thinks it's vital to keep supply lines as open as long as possible and favor the bosses anyways. But not this time. But not the time to dissect Biden's neolib agenda. The important demands seem very simple and fair: pay increases, same health insurance, fair attendance policy, and no one-man crews for the trains. But we didn't really get any of that. Instead, the man who claimed to be the pro-labor sided with the railway corporations over the workers in this case, the people of East Palestine, Ohio. The wheel bearing, moving onto the train, had at some point erupted into flames on the tracks. We have a lot of footage from, I believe it was Salem, Ohio, where the exterior cameras were able to catch that. If you look online trying to find videos of it, you're going to see that one. It had passed over a series of detectors that claimed stating that the first 2 showed that the bearing was heating up, and a third showed that it had climbed up to 250 degrees above outdoor temperatures, triggering an audible alarm for the crew to slow the train. Now, I could not confirm this, but from every bit of data I have extrapolated together to figure out this much, I believe that the train detectors in Salem were the first 2 that did not go off, and that the third one that went off was probably outside or farther down the line out of Salem from where the video was taken. long after it had already pretty much fucked up. I think the common belief from the NTSB is that the bearings, or not the NTSB, but from some other people who have worked on the trains, have expressed opinions that they think that by the time that they got there, the bearing had completely melted off. There's no evidence that the crew did anything wrong in this case. The type of failure seen here is known as a hot box, which, as I found out, was much more common before the use of roller bearings, which is similar in principle to ball bearings. Though the issue did decrease, the issue can still happen if the bearings are not properly maintained or inspected. A major issue when you work your employees to the bone, create unsafe work conditions, and increase workload just for that extra nickel. There are some questions concerning the fault detectors, even the one in the area. Why did the first two not give off an alarm? Was there not enough time to slow down and avoid the derailment? I don't know, but at least one thing I want to point out is the brakes. It seems that most experts agree that having electro-pneumatic brakes, I think it was the EPC brakes, pneumatic control brakes, instead would have not solved the issue. So given that experts don't think it's a major factor, I won't waste time discussing it. Understanding the politics around this is messy and can be conflicting when wanting to find who's to blame. Two easy factors to understand in this situation is the overall privatization of the industry and the underfunding of the FRA. Here's what I'm referring to. The Department of Transportation is not that old, being founded in 1967. Predecessor to the department would actually be part of the Department of Commerce, with vague related duties starting in 1950 by former President Truman. Already we have one issue, but I'm going to talk about two administrations to explain it. The Federal Aviation Administration and the Federal Railway Administration. The first flight achieved that history cites is in 1903, the Wright brothers' flight, and the first commercial flight was in 1914, a 23-minute flight from St. Petersburg, Florida to Tampa, Florida. Contrast this with trains, where the first vehicles like a train would be claimed to be originating as far back in 1550s Germany, but a more modern argument using steam engines can be placed anywhere between 1804 and 1814, depending on the invention you are reading up about. Early railways began to grow, and as steel production cheapened, expansions grew the industry. TLDR, the specific history deserves its own episode at some point, but essentially railway companies, if I don't struggle to say railway all the time, were using migrant labor in dangerous conditions, increased privatization alongside the oil industry, creating monopolies. They would start towns along the railway to encourage the use of the lines to increase territorial claims by white settlers to push out native populations, and relentlessly killed off nearly the entire bison population in North America, also related to removing natives off their land. All of this to say that the railways have been under private capitalist control for more than a century before a Department of Transportation was even conceived. Compared to the aviation industry, and the government has a far more regulated and monitored control of that form of travel. Even without considering the negative effects of the privatization of the industry, funding is still a central issue to address. This is the part that ensures railways, trains, and their carts are properly monitored, that all safety precautions are followed, and that employees are properly trained. With that being said, is Buttigieg free from blame? No, and neither is Biden. An easy law that can help tremendously is ensuring that trains cannot operate without at least a two-man crew, an engineer and a conductor. This already has proven itself to being a great measure to avoid accidents that could have been far worse than this disaster. Easy research has led me to say look into the BNSF Castleton derailment. Other easy policies that can be issued and enforced would be to force these companies to hire more inspectors to inspect, and enough workers to not run everyone on massive overtime shifts, or avoid not knowing your shifts until 4 hours before you start. Standardizing defect detectors can also go a long way into raising awareness on faulty carts. Lastly, a topic I also see come up would be ending the practice of precision scheduling railroading. This is the doubling or tripling the normal length of train cars, compounding issues and creating many logistics and scheduling issues. Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw recently had also been grilled pretty hard by reporters who are actually asking good questions for once. When questions about stock buybacks, increased dividends, and worker layoffs were asked, Alan Shaw tried to deflect and claim that they had spent over $1 billion in safety and technology, but struggled to explain the company's priority spending. One of the questions being, why have they spent millions in the past year lobbying against policies like enforcing a two-man crew? Another example was how Allen claims that they want to implement a solutions-based safety rules. However, executives have already bragged about the efficacy of the EPC brakes until a new possible government regulation would have standardized it, in which they promptly lobbied against it. Norfolk Southern boosted shareholder payouts 4,500% and slashed workforce pay down 33% prior to the Ohio derailment. It seems even some of that water has found its way down here in Houston as well, where I'm at. Texas Molecular is a company located near Deer Park that's within the greater Houston area, and was responsible for treating the water that firefighters had used. The contaminated water had been coming in for over a week before our Harris County judge, Lena Hidalgo, found out. She claimed her office was not notified, and when they looked into it, they discovered that about 500,000 gallons had already come in, with 2 million gallons expected in total. So legally, I do want to explain, the company does not have to report anything. Judge Lena has expressed frustrations over the lack of communication on the matter given the national attention covering such a disaster. I think this is a situation where the law should really be amended because it is a national disaster. It required FEMA support to come in, even though I think they were having issues there, but it is not a specific piece of knowledge that I know very much about, so I don't want to comment on it. It's just when it comes to a moment of national danger or national attention, I think we have a responsibility to keep information free-flowing and open to the public without any concerns and without any secrecy of where a lot of this is happening. I think people in the public, especially whenever you live near the areas where these plants are operating, even if you weren't near the containment site, if you operate or live near one of these facilities that are treating it, you still have likely come in some form of contact or exposure to it. So I do think it is better for the public to know. So I kind of agree with Lena that she should have known, so we should have known. So, even though they don't have to report anything, like I said, she has expressed frustrations over the lack of communication on the matter given the national attention covering such a disaster. Currently, operations have now ceased while Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee continues to work with the EPA to avoid exposure with the toxic waste disposal. Claims of vinyl chloride contamination in the area has caused cases of rashes, sore throats, to nausea, headaches, trouble breathing, and eye irritation. But I do want to also express that when it comes to vinyl chloride exposure, it's often treated as a carcinogen. It's treated as a cancerous material. However, it's not something that I have a lot of experience knowing, because I have no experience reading medical journals or with anybody with cancer, and I don't know anybody that works in the plastics industry personally. So I have no idea what are the common signs of things that you can expect with this. But I do know that right now, the CDC being down there and the EPA trying to get a handle of this thing, there's soil testing being done, water testing being done, but at the same time, there are lies being spilt about it, and people are not being told the truth in the area. It's hard to say, and I don't want to give out information that I am not confident in. So I just advise you do your own research, look up the health effects of exposure to vinyl chloride, especially whenever they burned it off for a few days, and whenever you got people who are afraid to drink the water. You know, if you want a full breakdown of the timeline, here we go. September 15th, U.S. Congress approved a legislative measure to force the adoption of a tentative agreement between unions and railroad giants to avoid massive strikes. However, 4 of the 12 unions, Smart TD, BMWE, BRS, and IBB, rightfully rejected the deal, citing lack of sick days specifically. Look to the Railway Labor Act to learn more about how the government can legally interject here. Now, you move forward next year to 2023. February 2nd, Norfolk Southern train 32N would depart from Madison Yard near St. Louis. Allegedly, the crew had departed with the train, reported hearing unusual sounds coming from the part of the train that would later become the cause of the derailment. It would travel 700 miles through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana before making its way through Ohio. I believe it had a final destination in Pennsylvania. February 3rd, around 8 p.m. in Salem, Ohio, a fire would be captured on a security camera of the failed bearing on the train. Nearly an hour later, at 8:54 p.m., the bearing gave out and led to 50 cars derailing in East Palestine, Ohio, while en route to Conway, Pennsylvania. Immediate evacuation orders were then issued. February 4th, the mayor of East Palestine declared a state of emergency. Air quality would begin monitoring up to a 1-mile zone. February 5th, Governor Mike DeWine issued an, quote, urgent evacuation notice, unquote, to anyone who had not yet left the area. February 6th, officials conducted a controlled release to avoid an explosion on the chemicals, one of the chemicals being vinyl chloride. February 8th, Governor Mike DeWine lifted the evacuation order. February 12th, the first soil testing was done, but claims of soil removal and testing do not add up with local claims. This is the part where I'm talking about people were being lied to. You know, you have a lifted evacuation order before soil testing is even done. February 14th, NTSB points to a wheel bearing failure as possible cause of the crash. February 15th, first town hall meeting held, but Norfolk Southern wasn't there. Governor DeWine would claim the water had been tested and it is safe to drink, but later the test had been found to be funded by Norfolk Southern and performed by a consulting firm on their payroll. The samples would be found to be flawed and unreliable. February 16th, Governor DeWine asks for federal aid and asks the CDC medical experts to come to the area. Senator J.D. Vance also releases his own video trying to capture the contaminated water as he tries to have good PR video almost like 10 plus days after, you know, the incident already happened. He didn't say anything. Oh my goodness. February 21st, the EPA administrator went door to door in East Palestine to make a list of demands to Norfolk Southern. DeWine would drink the tap water, which I don't buy, I think it's fake, in East Palestine to lower public fears about scrutiny of the toxic contamination of the water. February 22nd, former President Trump showed up to East Palestine, likely just trying to improve his optics in the public eye by giving his verbal support and to hand out, quote, Trump water, unquote. February 23rd, a day later, Pete Buttigieg finally makes a visit, and the NTSB releases a preliminary report claiming the derailment was, quote, 100% preventable, unquote. DeWine was challenged on CNN by a local resident in East Palestine to stay overnight within a mile within the affected zone. February 24th, Norfolk Southern seems to now allow at least 3,000 out of 19,000 workers paid sick leave. The 3,000 unionized workers will receive up to a week of paid sick leave, automatically 4 days of paid sick leave every new year, utilize a maximum of 3 paid personal leave days per year as personal sick leave. I would like to point out that this fight has gone on for 45 years, at least for some whose whole career is in the rail industry. It's taken all this bad press for Norfolk Southern to finally give in to some sick leave. Only one of the myriad of issues railway workers face. One last thing, even before the derailment happened, a crew working on the same train raised concerns over a previous breakdown that occurred just a few days prior. 151 cars, 9,300 feet, 18,000 tons. All this made the train too heavy and excessively long, and according to the workers, this led to the initial breakdown and eventual derailment. These concerns were brought forth to Norfolk Southern, but the concerns were ignored. The crew that ran the train has made their concerns to railway operations known. It's the same message these workers have said for years. Their bosses ignored them, and it's the people that suffer from their apathy and greed. And that brings you up to now. So far, this is what I know. This is what you know. There's a bit more pieces of information that's floating around, and there is a lot. And I want to dig into their dirty history so bad. And I want to see just how bad this company is. I want to see just how many violations they've actually had to go through even before this. I want to see the skeletons in their closet, because, oh my goodness. I really didn't want to try to run through this so fast, but at the same time, I've just felt that this was so much that needed to be said and compiled. I found very few sources that have been able to compile all this information together, and it's an incident that's still ongoing. I don't know what happens from here. I don't know how severe the cases will be. We already saw with a previous case, I cannot remember if it was, I think it was BASF, yeah, where they had issues in New Jersey because one of their dye plants had leaked toxic cancer or carcinogenic material into the river, and a bunch of kids were developing cancer, you know, like 3 or something, like a third, you know, something. It was a lot of kids, and I can't just quite remember the number off the top of my head. You know, we had an outbreak there from, you know, contaminated water with materials that were eroding and leaking into the groundwater. And here we have not only just an explosion, we have burned off vinyl chloride and just leaking contaminations of not only vinyl chloride, but other materials that I couldn't find a name for. I couldn't even figure out what other materials were out there because everyone's worried about this one. And I get it, it's super bad. It might be the worst one, but we don't know how bad everything's going to be if we don't have all this information. And it's infuriating. It's really infuriating, especially to see all these people trying to save face, all the Republicans trying to save face, and you have all these Democrats who are fumbling over themselves. You have them making excuses as to why they can't do anything. And meanwhile, there are simple laws and regulations that could be passed today to help the rail workers, and they don't. Instead, Congress likes to use its power and the bidding of Biden in this one case to fucking shut down the railways so that way we can keep the economy going, so we keep looking great, and it's fucking pissing me off. And I'm very heated. I am very passionately angry right now, as I think everyone should be. But this is a case that we're going to have to come back to at some point and just really see how bad it's getting. See how much data we can find. Or if there's more, you know, political stupidity going on. People trying to save face. Or if we find out that there are misidentified or misrun reports or something. Anything exciting or tragic. We'll get to it, but right now, this is everything, and it feels infuriating just being somebody who wasn't even directly affected and doesn't even live near the processing plant where they're going to treat the contaminated water that they're bringing in. I don't know. It makes me mad. And my heart goes out to those people, and I feel like, given how small this show is, there's only so much I can do right now. But we need to keep talking about this. We need to keep talking about the information, and we need to keep the information clear. We need to keep it correct, and we need to make sure that we are concise when we repeat ourselves about this. Because when we lead with emotion over the facts first, we make stupid decisions and we can make asses of ourselves. So if we're going to fight these fights, if we're going to keep supporting the people of East Palestine, we need to make sure we get our facts straight and that we can talk to the right person and make sure that he knows what he's doing wrong and pressure him pressure them to do the right thing. But I can only be angry and heated for so long. You know, it's a tragedy. It's a disaster, a completely avoidable one. We already know one name of who's responsible, Alan Shaw. We also know another, Biden, and even Pete Buttigieg. But there's few other people too. You can look at Trump himself. There was I believe there was a policy or something that he had repealed that just gave more tax cuts to the rail industry during the pandemic. I don't know. I don't care at the moment. I just want an ounce of justice or good news to come soon. Something. I don't know. I am going to do a part 2 where we're going to go ahead and dig a bit more into some violations. I think it would be a good idea if we go ahead and look with our old tool, the Violations Tracker website, and just look into a bit of their dirty laundry. I'm probably not going to invest too much into it, mostly because I owe you guys an episode for what I missed last week. But hey, I need to do something, and I'm really itching to know more. I'm really itching to find more in their closet. So, with that, I'll leave you guys to it. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And just remember, Mama Terra loves you. Take care.
Tongue-tied in the rain, soaked to my toes, got the chills to the bone. Cold stare through the haze, shrill in my voice and my lungs swell with pain. Call me out by my name, speak to me soft, help me gather my thoughts. Drown it out, plug the drain. Turn the record over, it can't be over. Ah, 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 ah. Write me when you get there, to that better place where you can think straight. Send me love if you can. Manifest the best of your wildest fantasies. I hope you find what you need. Over the hills, sunsets in the trees, soak in the glorious rays. The sun will be out, beating down on your shoulders. Tie a rope round my waist as I venture into the dark. I'll be back by the time you finally know where you are. Tear my ego apart. We are all we are, and we are all but one. Send me up to the stars. The distance between means nothing to me, or bury me in the sand. After I've done for you all that I can, I'll tell you what I knew, but I've got no concept of what I'll know. Leave a breadcrumb trail for the way